What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Sean O'Malley makes a shocking call out. Since winning UFC gold, Sugar Sean O'Malley has continued to call out a who's who of the combat sports community. Immediately following his win over Aljamain Sterling, O'Malley called out Gervonta Davis before then opening the door to a number of other potential showdowns inside the octagon. Given the fact that O'Malley is tall for the 135-pound division, many fans have continued to discuss the possibility of Sugar Sean making the jump to featherweight in the future for a clash with Alexander Volkanovski. During a recent episode of the O'Malley Show, the bantamweight champ gave his thoughts on a potential fight between he and Volkanovski.
I'm not saying I wouldn't fight Volk. I'm just being very honest. It's a very, very, very difficult fight. Do I believe I could knock him out? 100%. I believe I could knock out anybody around 130, 145. 55, it would be a little tougher. I need to put on some LBs. But Volk's a very difficult fight. I'm not saying I will never fight him. I'm just saying that's not what I want next. Yeah. I want to, maybe a year, 2 years.
In the meantime, Volkanovski has his hands full. Between a potential title defense against Ilia Topuria and a looming rematch with Islam Makhachev, it'll be interesting to see whether the stars align for a clash between the two in the future. Shout out to our first comments on yesterday's video. Thanks for the support. Now, let's take a look at another UFC fighter tested positive. UFC flyweight Felipe Bunez has been suspended 6 months for failing a drug test leading up to his UFC debut this summer. Back in June, the UFC signed the former LFA champ to step in on short notice for a bout with Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Before the two even had a chance to fight, Bunez was notified of a failed drug test. At the time, he keyed his fans in on the situation via Twitter. However, further updates regarding the situation have taken time to develop. Per the Nevada Athletic Commission's monthly meeting, Bunez has now been suspended for 6 months and also fined $326 for the situation. Thanks to a retroactive suspension, he'll be eligible to return to active competition later this year on December 7th, meaning the UFC could still book him a fight before the end of the year. After winning 2 straight fights under the LFA banner, it's safe to say when Bunez makes his UFC debut, he'll be looking to make a statement. Next up, let's take a look at update on Alexa Grasso cheating allegations. In the Noche UFC main event, both Valentina Shevchenko and many fans were confused on whether or not some of the knees that Alexa Grasso landed were legal or not. Although Shevchenko immediately protested the shots, the fight was allowed to continue, with officials reportedly double-checking to ensure that the shots were clean between rounds. This week, longtime MMA Journalist of the Year award winner Ariel Helwani spoke to an official to get clarification on the situation before then relaying the message to MMA fans.
And an official there told me that it is one hand, so she is correct about that. The hand has to be either flat on the mat or weight-bearing. And they also told me that in between rounds, they actually checked the replay. They said the yellow light was on and they were checking it. I don't know if that was noted on the broadcast. It might have been, I may have missed it. They checked it multiple times and they determined that all of the knees hit legally because the hand wasn't flat and or weight bearing and or at times even on the mat when they were landing. So their determination is those were not illegal knees.
Helwani also shared news that the Nevada State Athletic Commission would be holding a training session to go over the criteria for 10-8 rounds. Following the fight, the big question is whether or not the UFC will go ahead with booking a trilogy bout between these two women. Now, let's change gears and take a look at Stipe Miocic talks about Jon Jones fight. By the time Stipe Miocic makes the walk for the UFC 295 main event, it will have been over 2 years since he last competed inside the octagon. At 41 years old, Miocic is aware of the fact that the betting odds have him sitting as a considerable underdog. However, heading into what may be the biggest fight of his career, the former champ has no shortage of confidence. While speaking in a recent interview with betonline.ag, Miocic stated,
I feel great, honestly. I feel I've gained some weight. Feel strong, feel good. I mean, you hear your bumps and bruises along the way, but I mean, it's training camp, that it feels like. So, I feel great. My head's right where I need to be, and I think speed, my angles. I think punching power. I hit a lot harder than people think, and I think I have a great IQ. I always change it up, and when something happens, I'll figure a way out.
Currently, the odds have Miocic sitting as a plus 310 underdog to Jones' status as a negative 395 favorite. With the fight rapidly approaching in November, only time will tell whether he's able to overcome the odds and defeat arguably the greatest fighter in the history of the sport. Now, let's change gears and take a look at Bryce Mitchell talks about his UFC return. Bryce Mitchell's latest battle with his ex-girlfriend regarding his fruit trees may have made headlines recently, but the top-ranked featherweight still has his sights set on making a successful return to the octagon when he faces Dan Ige. After a rough patch that saw him lose his first professional fight, Mitchell was then forced out of a May return with a back injury. While speaking in a recent interview with the Schmo, he spoke about his plans to bounce back in the face of adversity.
And God's going to end up blessing me. I don't know when, and I'm hoping that it's this Saturday, but I know that it says in Proverbs, a man will be paid back for the work that his hands do. And I know my hands have put in the work, and I know because of Proverbs, I will be recompensed. I don't know when, but I believe it's coming, and I do believe it'll be on the 23rd that I get to take my highest form.
With Mitchell currently sitting as the 10th ranked featherweight, a win this weekend would certainly put him back on the road to title contention. Now, let's take a look at Joe Rogan talks about Conor McGregor return. There have been plenty of questions regarding the return of Conor McGregor, and very few answers. While the expectation was that the UFC would announce the date for his big return fight with Michael Chandler during the airing of season 31 of The Ultimate Fighter, the finale came and went without any word. Well, McGregor then expressed a desire to compete before the end of this year. The latest target has him making a return to the octagon early next year, according to Dana White. During a recent episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, the longtime UFC commentator spoke about the Irish superstar's return.
If it wasn't for his leg snap, he's still in the prime of his career. But that leg snap's a real problem. That's a real problem.
He's not coming back from that, huh?
I mean, if he does, he'll be the first. And if anybody does, maybe he can do it. Yeah. If anybody can do it, maybe it's him, because he snapped his leg in the prime of his career. It's a hard one to come back from. Nobody really comes back from that one. It's just...
Is it because you have to have metal put in there?
You do. You have to have plates, and then it's also, you got to think the difference is you're kicking, and you're taking kicks. Like, guys are going to kick you in that shin for sure. They're going to kick you in your calf.
Scar tissue and everything,
Nerve damage, all the above.
Yeah.
And you got to think when that leg snaps, it snaps like that, right? And then you got all that broken bone that's damaging all that tissue inside of it. And it's been 2 years. And, there's all this talk about him and Michael Chandler fighting from The Ultimate Fighter. I know he's sparring. I've seen footage of him sparring, and he looks good, but he also looks saucy. So there's that. So, you got to get off that. And then there's a 6-month period where USADA has to test him randomly. Here we are in the situation where, he's still in the prime of his athletic career, and he lost that fight to Dustin Poirier, but it was a great fight up until the moment his leg snaps. I hope he comes back. I mean, it would be an amazing story, and I would love to see someone actually come back from that injury.
Then Rogan slammed USADA, saying that all testing should be done in-house and that they need to stop bothering fighters in their personal lives. He also mentioned how fighters should be allowed to use peptides and recover as quickly as possible. Here's what he had to say.
And then there's a 6-month period. USADA has to test him randomly, which I think that USADA thinks a mistake. I really think they should do all that in-house. Because USADA does stuff like, they don't do it anymore, but they were doing stuff like waking guys up at 6:30 in the morning, like the day of the weigh-ins, and testing them. It's fucking insane.
Yeah,
insane. For world title fights.
Right.
Fucking insane. And that's the argument also for him not being in the USADA pool. Of course. I mean, if anybody shouldn't be in the USADA pool, get him out of that. Let him do everything he can to come back, especially in the prime of his athletic career. I mean, there's a real problem where they're stopping guys from taking things like BPC 157. All that stuff does is let you heal. It's called body protection peptide 157. Body protection peptide compound. It's a really good peptide for healing injuries. I think athletes should be able to use everything they can, especially in a sport like MMA.
Agree. Yeah.
Everything they can.
Yeah.
But the problem was they used to be able to do testosterone.
I think they should still.
I do too. With testosterone, you can take a guy who's an older athlete who has an older mind, who thinks like a veteran, they really understand the game. Because a lot of those guys, by the time they get to that certain age, they think real well. They understand the game better. They're more mature, but their body just doesn't work the same anymore. They're a step behind.
They don't have testosterone in their bodies anymore. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of people have it in their head that it's cheating, right? They think about Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa and all that shit and getting busted and they think it's got a negative connotation in a lot of people's minds that testosterone replacement is, oh, you're doing steroids, you're cheating. But if you're intelligent about it, and if you do it with a good doctor, and you get your blood work done, and you don't abuse it, it's very good for you. It would be good if they did it
level is.
with fighters, if like the UFC administered it. Like, you can't administer it on your own. They have to randomly test you to make sure you're not fucking off and doing something crazy. But like, this is the amount you get. Let's make sure that your blood work stays within this very normal line.
That parameter.
Right, so you're not cheating. You're just maintaining.
Exactly.
That would be a good call.
When McGregor does return to the octagon, it'll be interesting to see whether or not he's able to defy the odds and string together wins after suffering such a brutal injury. Let's take a look at UFC Fight Update. Kicking things off, we have reports of a UFC Fight Night Sao Paulo scrap between David Onama and Lucas Alexander, which will see Onama look to build on a win over Gabriel Santos earlier this year that returned him to the win column after a majority decision loss to Nate Landwehr last summer. On the flip side, Alexander will be looking to build momentum on a March victory over Steven Peterson that returned him to the win column following a loss to Joanderson Brito in his UFC debut. In addition, reports have surfaced that former women's bantamweight champion Miocic Tate has signed her next fight contract. Since returning to the octagon in 2021, Tate has gone 1-2, with her most recent loss to Lauren Murphy coming in her flyweight debut. After that loss, Tate had set her sights on a return to the bantamweight division and was booked for a clash with Mayra Bueno Silva that saw her ultimately forced to withdraw from the bout as a result of an injury. Whether Tate can snap her 2-fight skid when she returns to the octagon, only time will tell. Unfortunately, this week also saw the UFC part ways with Ronnie Lawrence, who revealed that he was taking time away from active competition to focus on his health. The automated Twitter account UFC Roster Watch caught his removal from the roster, which came after Lawrence posted on Instagram back in August that he had been dealing with a number of things, including staph infections on his face. As Lawrence looks to focus on his health, there's no doubt that the MMA community is behind him. Dana White absolutely goes off on UFC judge for the split decision on Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko. He said on a press conference that the judge who scored it a 10-8 needs to be investigated.
You mentioned the 10-8 rounds. I think we all know what you're referencing there. Well, we didn't see you on Saturday, so I guess what were your thoughts on the title fight and how it played out?
When I found out that one of the judges scored 10-8, I'm like, this guy should be fucking investigated for this. This is the craziest shit I've ever seen in my life. And, there's a seminar tomorrow with the Athletic Commission on 10-8s. Hopefully they can get this cleared up, especially in title. There's so much at stake in a title fight. More than just money, show and win and pay-per-view and championships and legacies. And they've assured me that this guy isn't a bad guy. He just fucked up and made a mistake.
Hani Yahya is out of his fight against Haley Alatang at UFC Vegas 81. It's important to note that he's 39 years old and has pulled out of his last 2 fights now. The reason for pulling out has yet to be confirmed, but some fight fans reacted to this news by saying, hasn't he pulled out of like every fight for the past couple of years now? Cut this weak person. Back-to-back pullouts. He's 39, hasn't won since 2021. Maybe it's time to call it a career. Top comments. If you remember back to Costa versus Adesanya, going into that fight, Paulo was a beast. He had gone 13-0 and was expected to fold Puppy Bender like a chair. It's amazing what a difference 3 years makes. Hope to see him smash Hamzat and reclaim his dignity and a shot at the strap. Why the hell didn't Valentina's team file an appeal to the obvious error in judgment in that 5th round of their rematch? There's more than enough expert opinion to back up such an appeal. This judge is like the Mario Yamasaki of judges. With that blatant error in judging that 5th round, he is now like the Bud Light of all MMA judges. The UFC should enable the sudden death 6th round if the decision comes to a draw. That's when we'll see where the champion of champions are made of. I'm all for Shevchenko feeling she won the match, but to say it would only be fair to fight in her hometown for the trilogy is absurd. Grasso fought in Vegas, not Mexico City. Make sure to leave a comment and you might get featured in our next video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss any MMA news. Check out our video from yesterday if you missed it. See you tomorrow.